So I'm Krista Johnson. I'm Director of Ethics and Leadership here at the Fifth Center. And so about, December 21, we found out about a big gift from a donor that we were supposed to spend the whole gift running an internship program, summer 22. And so that left us, a few months to get this figured out. And so we're just hustling to figure out who's partners, who can we do this with. And Nancy mentions St. Mary and Tim. So I reach out to Tim and I say, hey, look, this is who I am. We are willing, if you have any interest in fully funding an intern that can work for you full-time this summer. And Tim comes back. So most partners, when I do this, are like, that's great, they'll work with us. Tim comes back and says, okay, here's what I want. So we have this idea. And so what I need is an intern who can interview residents and write this story into a book. And I go, oh my gosh, that is very specific. It's like, I want writing samples, and this has to be the perfect person. And so I'm really nervous. Our ad for the internship program came out really late. And I got one person who put St. Mary as their number one priority. And that was Anna. And I look and I go, oh my gosh, we found the person. We have the person. And then I go, I really hope Tim likes her. Because if Tim doesn't like her, I don't have anything. But luckily, as many of you know, Anna's great, and Tim is great, and that was a perfect match. So this project, Tim and I were just talking, and he was like, look, I figured I'd give it a shot. And if it just flopped, that'd be okay. But instead, we have here a fully published book, right, that we're going to share with you today. And the work has gone so well that this summer, we have another intern who's taking pictures over here, Amanda, whose job this summer is going to work to further this, right? To spread the word, to make this an ebook, to get the podcast recordings out, maybe to do some more interviews. So this work isn't finished. So now I'd like to just say a couple words about Anna. So Anna Luepke, she just graduated, so everyone, we can congratulate. And she graduated with a political science and economics majors, right? She was a Dayton Civics Scholar in the Fitz Center, so it's a 3-year program where they go do great work in the city of Dayton. And she was, I think most relevantly to this project, part of the Moral Courage Project. So the Moral Courage Project, they went out to Oakland right before last summer. She actually had to start the internship late because she was out in Oakland interviewing unhoused persons, right? Doing the same work out there that she ended up doing here. And it just set up everything so beautifully. And as most of you have already read, she does great work, and there couldn't have been a better person to do this. So we are very grateful for Joe Scamanici, I should say, our donor, for this internship program, and for Anna. So without further ado, Anna.
All right.
Hi everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Anna Luepke, and over the past summer, I had the amazing opportunity of interviewing 15 of the many incredible residents at St. Mary Development's apartment communities through the Fitz Center's Ethics and Leadership Internship. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Tim Beats, St. Mary Development Corporation, Krista Johnson, the Fitz Center, and every single resident I interviewed, and every person that made this project possible. It's all thanks to you that I'm standing here today, and that these stories have had the opportunity to be shared with so many people. Mark Adams, the first resident I interviewed, told me, "It is quite an undertaking to start loving someone. You have generosity, patience, and blindness. And even at the start, there is a moment where you have to decide if you want to cross the abyss. And if you think about it, you don't do it." Mark set the stage for a series of awe-inspiring stories and knowledge that I would have the opportunity to hear over the course of the summer. I was immediately struck by Mark's intelligence in his interview. Anyone could tell that he was extremely well-read and always offered philosophical anecdotes for the life he led. This particular quote always struck with me. It is the quote of someone who has lived a much greater life than I have, and of someone who has grasped a much better understanding of the world than I do. This and many other stories throughout the summer made me acutely aware of my youth and my inexperience. They made me realize just how much I had to learn from the person sitting across from me, the people who have lived my life 4 times over. For each and every interview following Mark Adams, I kept this in mind. I knew that by sitting across from these residents, I was the least intelligent person in the room. And from them, I gained a crash course on life that I could never receive anywhere else. Collectively, these residents hold hundreds of years of struggle and hardship, and most of all, resilience.
Anna, I think you're a little louder. It's really hard to hear you out
sorry.
there. Maybe just like it's louder so you can project a little more. Sorry about that.
They are strong without even knowing they are strong. They embrace hardship without even knowing it is hardship. As Mark told me, you just keep going. When I first began this project, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what would be on the other side of the questions I had to ask, but I don't know if the residents did either. They would often pause before answering, deep in reflection, pondering a question they had never been asked before. They had lived such long, beautiful, yet heartbreaking lives, yet never had the chance to reflect on everything they had lived. I like to think they learned a little something more about their own lives, just as I had learned about them. Before each interview, I could tell the resident was wary of what was to come. I was a stranger about to ask them deeply personal questions about their lives, and they didn't quite understand why. I don't have much of a story, they would always tell me. I don't know why you picked me. Yet each and every resident told me a story worthy of its own novel and more. Each of these stories has not left my mind since the moment I heard them, and more importantly, each person has not left my mind since the moment I met them. Francine Buchanan, a resident at Twin Towers, told me, everybody in our building right here is the same. Nobody got more than the other. So you gotta treat people with kindness. I believe Francine speaks for all her fellow residents when she says this. Each story I heard this past summer was extraordinary and unique, yet they all shared one common theme. Nobody knows how to give more than those who have gone without. A perfect example of this is Ruth Maxwell. She is 92 years old and she lives at the Biltmore in downtown Dayton. Ruth was 10 years old when she started working in the fields. As a child, she would wake up in the morning and spend hours in the field picking cotton, filling up bags in the Alabama sun. Her father was a sharecropper, and that meant the whole family had to pitch in. Every day was the same. Every day, all day, they worked. Ruth and her siblings could only go to school when it was raining or the days got cold. Otherwise, there was work to be done. Ruth says that her father ignored them like he didn't know they were his children. To him, they were workers. In fact, Ruth and her siblings weren't even allowed to speak to each other. Her father liked the quiet, so they stayed quiet. To this day, Ruth has lived with the burdens of how she was raised. She says she grew up in a family without love, and that's not how a family should be. Ruth was 27 when she finally got to escape the life she was stuck in. She moved to Dayton and found a whole new life here. She met her first husband, and she experienced something unfamiliar to her, love. Ruth says, I was learning how to love. Not how to love men, but how to love, period. Because we come from a place where we weren't loved. We would just work all the time. Ruth married her first love, and from that moment, Ruth swore that her children would have a different life than she had. When I was younger, I said, if I ever get grown and have some kids, they won't be raised like I was raised. And they weren't. Ruth made sure of it. She had 3 girls and 2 boys, and she always kept them close by. She took them with her to bingo, to church, and everywhere else she went. She made sure they went to school and got the education that she never had. On the first of the month when the money came in, Ruth made sure to treat her kids right. She would take them down to the arcade or McDonald's and Arby's. Even if money was short, she knew her kids deserved something special. Today, Ruth has not given up on her promise to give her children a better life than she had. She spent her life making sure they knew they were loved, and she now lives with her 2 children at the Biltmore. Next, I want to tell you about Thomas Matthews. Thomas grew up in Detroit in a neighborhood that often went without. When winter came and temperatures dropped, he noticed that many of his neighbors couldn't afford to keep themselves warm all those months. Thomas was only 10 years old, but he knew he had to do something. He taught himself how to drive at a young age, so he went down to the coal yard by his house. He stole a truck, filled it up with coal, and drove around his neighborhood, delivering it to all his neighbors. It wouldn't be enough for the whole winter, but it was something. coal Thomas distributed that day would keep his entire neighborhood warm for a month. He knew how important this was to his neighbors, so it wasn't long before his coal delivery became a yearly tradition. As Thomas grew up, he never forgot the importance of providing for the people that needed it. Thomas was living at a homeless shelter when he helped start a food pantry at his church. He would go behind shops and restaurants and collect the bread and food that they left behind. Everything he collected would go straight to the pantry, and soon the leftover bread from restaurant alleys turned into trucks full of donations. When Thomas got to the Biltmore, he brought the food pantry with him. Most days Thomas worked at the pantry, he would bring boxes of food home. He would leave them all around the building for people to find. Some days he left them on the vents, some days he left them on the windows, but mostly he would place them on the elevators and watch as they disappeared behind the closing doors. Thomas didn't want anyone to know that it was him because he knew that people were often too embarrassed to ask for help. Thomas didn't like to talk about his homelessness because he never wanted to ask for pity. When he worked at the food pantry at his church, nobody knew that he was homeless himself. When the church realized all that Thomas had done for his community, they knew they had to recognize him for it. So in 2014, Thomas Matthews was Greater Allen Church Man of the Year. Each of these stories came with deep pain, yet a sense of selflessness I had never seen anywhere else. When I asked residents what gave them hope, they often replied with what they had done for others. Ultimately, this is what got them through, the knowledge that they could still be there for the people they loved the most. Each and every resident shared a story just like this. Despite all the pain, sharing all the things they had done for others always put a smile on their face. Throughout these interviews, I was particularly struck by the strength and depth of the faith each resident possessed. I was raised Catholic, but I grew away from my faith as I aged. Yet, I was in awe of how powerful and resilient the faith of these residents was and always has been. Almost every resident told me that God is the one who got them through. Faith got them through addiction, homelessness, disability, illness, deaths of loved ones, and so much more. And when they seemingly had nothing left, their faith was still there. It gave them the strength that they didn't know they had and the resilience that was always there. God, help me overcome this, John Moore pleaded when he was stuck in a cycle of addiction. It was with this sentence that John found his way to sobriety. Whether God was there or not, his faith gave him the strength to find his way out. Faith always seemed to bring people together when they needed it the most. When Ernesta Russell was spending time at the shelter, she gifted the other residents Bibles so they could pray with her. It wasn't just the faith that got them through, but the friendships they formed through praying together every night. It was this small sense of community that often got a resident through, and it was their faith that brought them to it. Francis Buchanan, a resident at Twin Towers, told me, "Nobody knows what somebody is going through unless they tell you." Francine's statement is not only powerful, but sums up my experience working on this book. I think when we cross the people on the street, we don't quite understand how much knowledge they hold and what stories they have to tell. After this project, I don't just think about the stories that have been shared, I think about the stories that haven't. Each and every single person I interviewed shared such a beautiful yet agonizing story that I can't help to think about all the people I didn't have the chance to interview. What stories do they hold? What more do I have to learn? I'll never know unless I ask.
Thanks, Anna. My name's Tim Beek. I'm the president of St. Mary Development Corporation. And I'm not going to speak for long because I don't think anybody can really follow in what Anna shared with you in those stories. But what an incredible book. And even more so, what incredible residents we have that live in our buildings. We work with a huge number of partner organizations. Some are governmental, some are non-governmental, some are non-profit, some for-profit. We work with faith-based and secular individuals and groups. And it's all with our mission to serve older people and improve the quality of their lives. But as you can see from the stories in the book and what you heard Anna just say, our residents are the ones who improve the quality of our lives. Your stories are so powerful, and I just wanted to share a little bit about how many people they've touched. when we were looking for somebody to write the book, I told Nancy and Krista that I wanted to share how our residents grew up. What struggles did they have? How did they overcome their struggles? How did they deal with traumatic experiences? And I wanted to show their bravery, tenacity, and hope, because I knew through talking to residents there is a lot of bravery, tenacity, and hope in them. So we thought, well, let's write this down so we can share it with other people. And I wanted to share how the stability of living in an affordable apartment community, especially where you have a service coordinator to help you out, what a beautiful thing that is, and how that can improve the quality of somebody's life. So we have already distributed more than 1,500 copies of the book, and the reaction has been tremendous. And I wanted to share 3 of the responses that we received, because I thought they were especially just kind of telling. The first one was from a healthcare partner we had who flew into the Dayton area for a meeting with me. And I gave him a copy of the book, and the next day he wrote me an email and he said this. He said, "Tim, I wanted you to know that I read the entire book on my flight home on Friday. That's an amazing book. It really renewed my faith in our work and God's guidance in our ministries, even when day to day it's difficult to see. Thank you for that gift. I'm humbled." It was not St. Mary that renewed his faith. It was each of you whose stories were in the book that renewed his faith. That's an incredible thing, to renew somebody's faith. The second response is from a national financial institution that we use to help finance new apartment communities. I sent him a copy of the book and he wrote to me, "Tim, your book is excellent. What a great idea. I would like to share it with my staff because we often talk about the impact of our work. But as a capital provider, we rarely get to interact with the ultimate beneficiaries of our work, the people that live in your buildings. Your book tells a compelling story." So he's using this book to train his staff who work across the country creating affordable housing. But the book is not training his staff. Each of you who are in the book, you are training people to do more of this because they see the importance and they see the hope that you're bringing to him, because this work can often be very difficult. And the last response I wanted to share is from a banker with whom we work. And I like this one because she didn't want me to share this with too many people because she spent too much time at work reading the book. And she said, "Tim, thanks so much for Hope. I just finished it. I started reading it here at work and couldn't put it down and really enjoyed the compelling stories of the residents. Wow, you are a big part of something incredible. Thanks for all the good work you do. We are proud to be your partner." And it's true, I am part of something incredible. But that something is really someone, it's you. Each of our residents is incredible. You are incredible. You are resilient. You are tenacious. You bring us hope. And that was really what the overall goal of the book was. And I think it's a miracle. Your lives are a miracle. But to have this to share with other people is a miracle too. And it's really a blessing and an honor for us to be part of your lives and provide a home for you. So thank you, Anna, for writing the book. And thank each of you who's in the book for sharing your lives with us, because it's truly changing people. And when Amanda works for us this summer, we're going to try to spread the word and get more copies out, because your lives are changing people and you are bringing us great hope.